Nomads Volume 1. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing good, doing good. Having some coffee, looking at some comics myself, and having a good morning.
It's always fun. So, is this book live on Kickstarter now?
Yeah, it's live. It launched October 1st. We had a banging first 24 hours. We cleared our goal of 2,500 in 4 hours. We cleared it before lunch, and we're still growing.
All right, what's the book about?
All right, so if you haven't seen Nomads takes place in a primal post-apocalyptic future. So 1,000 years in the future, mankind has fallen, and they've reverted back to living and working together in these small nomadic tribes. And this book in particular follows Hawk, and he's on a journey to find his lost tribe. His tribe went missing during a botched hunt, and the only thing that was left was tracks. So he set out for the first time to leave the jungles of the lush, kind of like the Shire. Like if you're thinking of like, it's like the safe area, where they're used to, where they. Sorry about that. My cat's trying to get my attention. So he heads out of the lush for the first time into a primal world that's filled with massive beasts and other like savage, unfriendly tribes. Volume 1 follows his journey through the desert, through the Badlands, where he encounters the Boar King and the savage man-eater tribe.
Hmm. Is Volume 1 a collective of the previous issues?
Yeah, so Nomads, I've been working on Nomads for about 4 years now. The first book came out in 2016, and I launched a book every year. And so Volume 1 collects the first 3 issues, plus an unreleased giant-size finale issue for the Desert Arc. It's about 120 pages. I'm including extras like sketches, process shots, fan art, and lots of other stuff, script excerpts. Yeah, it's
All
going to be
right.
a pretty beefy book.
Um, is the other? Are you in comic book stores yet?
No, so actually, Nomads hasn't been distributed or sold to comic book shops. The main way that I've been getting it out to people is at conventions. So for a long time, I've just kind of maintained this kind of like local presence. And it's actually one of the reasons why I'm going to Kickstarter. So I plan on making the fourth issue regardless, but I felt like it was time and like the book was ready for a wider audience. So I'm kind of approaching Kickstarter like a distribution service or like a pre-order service, so that people who aren't in the area can get a chance to pick it up. And from there, I'll probably be doing more cons and eventually get it up on my website.
All right. What state are you in?
So I'm in Michigan. I'm in Pontiac, Michigan specifically. We're about 30 minutes out from Detroit.
Oh, all right. And you go to all the cons around there in Michigan?
Yeah, so a lot of the smaller ones. This year I was set to go to Motor City Con, which is our largest comic book convention next to Umicon, which is an anime convention.
Mm.
And I was going to start doing some of the larger shows, and my plans were to start going to some of like the tri-state area. So start doing some shows in Ohio, Illinois, and just kind of like start expanding a little bit. As you get more material, uh, I feel like the shows are getting easier and easier. You have more to talk about, more to share, more to sell, and I kind of was feeling like Nomads was at that point. But because of everything, Motor City Con actually got canceled, and so I had actually planned to launch the Kickstarter at the same time as the convention, uh, but everything was kind of uncertain. So I like put it off, and I was like, well, I'm gonna just refine this, work on the Kickstarter a little bit more, add some new backer tiers, and really just kind of like look at Kickstarter and try to understand it and plan for something that might be a little bit bigger.
Mm.
And before I knew it, it was August, and I was like, well, launch this thing. Like I can't just sit on this all year. Like I want to launch it. I want to try to get the book out, uh, this year, and stay on my pace of like a book a year for Nomads. And so we launched October 1st.
All right, and are you only gonna do 4 issues for Hawk, or is he gonna get more
No.
issues, or is
Yeah,
that just his
he's
story?
gonna get more issues. So Hawk's story is right now, currently as it's written, is about 12 issues in total. So I plan on doing 3 volumes, 4 issue sets of him and his journey through the world. And so what this first because Nomads is a world. There's various tribes, there's various regions, there's different cultures and different levels of advancement. But Hawk is a really good intro into this world. He's seeing a lot of it for the first time, just like the reader. His tribe, the Hawken, they generally don't travel outside of the rainforests. They stay there. They are the keepers of knowledge. So, and what that means is that they've passed down the histories of the world through oral tradition, and they've committed these stories to memory. So Hawk is like a walking book, and he knows a lot of what's happened to the world. But because they've been so secluded and it's been so long since the cataclysm, they don't really have any sort of visual idea of what things looked like or what things were. And a lot of things have been kind of like lost in translation. So when they see something like an android or like a drone, they think it's a demon. They refer to it as a monster, because it's not anything that's familiar to them. They're used to actual animals and beasts, but something that's made out of metal is totally foreign to them. There's actually a scene in the book where Hawk is telling the Boar King about the cataclysm and what happened, and the way that it's depicted is it's kind of psychedelic, and it is. I did it in this big 2-page spread, and the reason why it's depicted that way is because to them something like an AI would be a god,
Hmm.
but they don't have any real they don't have the words for that. So it's done in this like very imaginative way, as if 2 people sitting around a fire were telling legends or stories.
All right, and later on issues, are you gonna explore other tribes and like flesh the whole world out?
Yeah, so there, yes, definitely. So currently, and I actually have like a world map on my Kickstarter, which is kind of fun. Um, yeah, so you only get to see a brief little bit of the lush, which is the jungle region. And primarily through this book, you're seeing the Badlands, which is like this desert. There's a massive canyon with that was out and turned into like these jagged crystals of glass.
Hmm.
And the book carries you up through that right up to the end. And volume 2 is going to take place in what they call the freeze, which is like the I guess if I had to give it like an equivalent, it'd be like the Pacific Northwest or Canada in the middle of winter.
Okay.
And because it's so far in the future, like weather patterns have changed. Like a lot of this stuff is it's like you could put it on a map about where they're at, but even still, it's been so long and so much has happened that it's radically different than what we know it as now. But yeah, so you'll see the freeze. There's tribes that are up there, and they work a little bit differently. They're not as machines and stuff aren't as foreign to them. They're a little more familiar with it. They still consider it some form of magic, but they're not totally terrified of it. Um, and then farther up to that, um, I'm gonna keep that held tight. That's volume 3. But yeah, you will get to see more of the world. We will encounter more tribes and see kind of like how they function and what they look like. One of the big things in Nomads, which I'm really drawing on, is and something that I love and that I love to study is like the native tribes and cultures that were here, of the Native Americans. And so each tribe kind of pulls from some of those influences. Like Boar King, like his mask is made out of these red tiles, and I'm primarily like looking at a lot of like Aztec, and kind of like how their ceremonial masks look. Uh, Hawk is kind of based more on like the Navajo, but not directly pulled from that, just more so inspired by, because in this future, like it's like again, it's been millennia into the future, and civilization and the peoples as we know them, that doesn't exist anymore. It's a totally different world at this point. Um, so but again, that what I was trying to talk about was like in the world of nomads, people cover their face, and that face covering is a representation of who they are. So they might embody a certain type of animal. That's why, the Boer tribe, that's like their mascot. That's their animal that they embody. And so you'll see a lot of like pig references and boar references and tusks and bristly hair. Whereas like the Hawk tribe, they're all based off the birds that they see in the jungle. So a lot of feathers, a lot of beaks, a lot of like cool angular designs, and so on. So as we encounter other tribes, maybe there's a wolf clan, or there's a snake tribe, and from there you'll see different embodiments of that animal.
Wow, the book sounds very interesting. Like it's different. I like it. Might have to check it out myself. Uh,
Yeah,
so are you a one man band or do you have a crew
yeah.
you
So
work on this?
yeah, man. So for Nomads, I'm a one man show. I'm the writer, the penciler, the inker, the colorist, and the letterer. And I also put the book together. I do all the graphic design. And the reason for that is that I'm just like a self-taught artist. I did go to art school for about a year, and I dropped out. This was in 2008, and I ended up going into a different career field entirely than art. But what I did do is I kept working on comics, and around 2015 was when I really started to like dig in. Like I got a desk. I started getting like all the materials and tools I wanted, and I just decided I was going to learn how to make a comic by myself. I wasn't going to like pay anyone. I wasn't going to rely on anyone. I just I just buckled down and was like, I'm going to learn this. And so I sat down, and each step of the way, I would just try to focus on it. And what eventually happened is I started working on other books with other teams and other people, but Nomads was always my solo project. That's like always been my thing. And in that, I've kind of used Nomads as like a tool to experiment with drawing and coloring and writing, even just trying to get better at that, like writing scripts and formatting and just really trying to understand every piece of the process. So yeah, Nomads it's me. But that being said, I think that it's important not to work in a vacuum. And so I have an editor on the project. His name's Stephen Kurbitz, and he helps me look over the script, helps me ideas, helps me trim the fat, helps me kind of like structure it out. And he's a writer who I've been working with for almost 10 years now, and brought him onto Nomads with me. Him and I collaborate frequently, so that's been really awesome. It's not totally a one man band, but uh, because we all need a little bit of help sometimes. Sometimes it helps to have some fresh eyes on it.
Oh yeah. And you're a pretty good artist. Like what I've just from the pictures you sent me, they look good. I mean, looks awesome, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, that's just comes from drawing forever. Like, just drawing as a little kid, drawing all through school. Probably a similar story you hear from a lot of artists. But what I think, at least for me, about that, and I appreciate you saying that. I think that with enough practice, everyone can reach some sort of competency. Um, I think that, excuse me, I think that one of the most important things for this is like showing up to the table and drawing, and even if you don't feel like it, just continuing to draw. And one of the things that really helped me do that and get to that point was once I released the 0 issue, the very first issue of Nomads, I started getting other people asking me to do comic book work for them. And so it was almost like it was this incentive to keep going. It wasn't just like, oh, like I finished this one book and shit, I'm never doing that again. It was like, oh no, like I got to get on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And before you know it, you, and even if you just look at Nomads, and I know sometimes you can look at this two ways. You can either think of it as like interesting, or you can think of it as kind of like inconsistent. But what you'll see through Nomads is from 0 issue to issue 1 to issue 2 to the giant sized finale issue, you'll see growth. Like you'll see my artwork change a little bit, but it's always still the same book, but it's just learning. It's just about like every page there's something new or some sort of breakthrough, it feels like.
All right. And what advice would you give to the people out there? Because I know a lot of people that do Kickstarters. And what would you say the do's and don'ts of a Kickstarter would be?
Okay, so this is something that I've been like thinking about quite a bit because at least for me, doing a Kickstarter is very intimidating. Luckily, I have a, a lot of good people around me who are willing to help me and give me advice. And so one of the things, almost the first thing that I would say is, consider other people's advice and perspective. I know that's, at least for me as an artist, sometimes that ego can cause you to be like, no, like I'm going to do this my way. I'm going to do this like all the way. It's me. But I think that you have to really kind of open up and just kind of hear other people out and what they think, because especially people who have done it before. So like, at least for me, it's like trying to talk to my peers and other artists who are making Kickstarters and asking them literally what you just asked me, and say like, what should you do? What shouldn't you do? Ask them and listen to them and like hear them out. The second thing is be realistic with yourself, and don't beat yourself down, but be realistic in that, like, what do you think you can make? What can you provide? And some people get crazy with it. They add a ton of stretch goals. They add all these different things that they don't really know how to make yet. And and so for Nomads, I've had quite a few people be like, "Oh, you got to do stretch goals. You got to make this. You got to make that." But I'm not necessarily comfortable. I'm not to that point yet where I think I can fulfill that at a quality level. So what I did do is I made my tiers very simple, like super simple, so that anyone can look at them and be like, okay, I get this with that tier, this with that tier, and then there's a tier where I can get it all. And I don't want to get lost in the whole Kickstarter process because it can get kind of crazy. Um, just looking at the first 24 hours, it was far beyond what I expected it to be, and a little nerve wracking. But I'm thankful that I took the time to kind of like make my Kickstarter within my means. Like I know I can make all that stuff. I know I can provide it on time, and and I think that's super important for anyone doing their first Kickstarter.
All right. Well, thank you, Ryan, for coming out and talking with us today. That's all the time we got for now. But is there anything you got to tell the people before we go?
Yeah, I want you to check out Nomads on Kickstarter. I want you to look at this book. I want you to read it. And if you're interested in seeing a sample of it, you can see it on my website, tavarezart.com/nomads, or just tavarezart.com. And you can read the first 60 pages. That's about half the book. I want you to read it. I believe that if you look at my book, you read it, you're going to enjoy it. You're going to have fun. It's not your typical dystopian future. It's a different future. It's it's interesting. It's exciting. It's deep, and I just want you to give it a shot.
All right. Well, thank you, Ryan.
All right. Thank you, Cody.